Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Find Your Model Health podcast. Today we have a return guest. I hope you guys will enjoy this as much as I do. Every time I talk to this speaker, I enjoy our conversations. So we have back with us approximately a year later, Don Moxley. And Don is a sports scientist at trainrecoverwin.com. And he is also, if some of you remember, he's a former captain and Big Ten champion with the Ohio State University wrestling team. He's also served as the university's first sports scientist, and he's helped many athletes to not only track their progress, but also improve strength, cardiovascular fitness, and resilience. And he has also helped to lead teams to the national title and three Big Ten championships. So to say, Don, that you are experienced in all things sports and science would be an understatement. So welcome back to the podcast.
I am so excited to be back and see you again and talk to your tribe. I love this stuff. So thank you for the opportunity.
We had a great conversation. It was approximately this time last year, and I really enjoyed it because if you remember, it was something I mentioned I was really passionate about was HRV, and I had said to
Hmm.
you that I track my HRV a lot and it hits 140, and you're like, no way. And
That's awesome.
it's not 140 anymore because I've had some stress, but I'm still up there in the 120s.
That's great.
I absolutely love HRV as a marker of not only if my body is stressed, then I can say why, what caused this,
Hmm.
but also if I'm recovering, because on some level, I suppose I would be a well-trained athlete. So I want to be recovering optimally, not just for my physical health, my mental health as well.
Sure.
We had a great conversation on HRV. And before we get into your new stuff, how is the HRV world going? Have you uncovered any new research or came across anything new?
Well, in the last year, Chemaine, the research has been largely reinforcing a lot of the concepts that we already know, but we continue to get more good research supporting that.
Mm.
What's been exciting to watch is the development of new tools and seeing the manufacturers evolve their technologies.
Mm.
Um, I'm a pretty big user of an Aura ring, and I think Aura does a great job. Their technology is really sound. It's very trustworthy. I came across a new product about a year ago. The technology is really good. If you go to a website called NowWatch, NOWATCH.com, this is a company out of the Netherlands, and they have made just an absolutely gorgeous wearable device. So if, a lot of times the HRV stuff can be pretty nerdy. It's some kind of a black plastic gadget on your wrist that does not look, you stand out. I mean, when you're wearing it. Well, this Now Watch technology it's very good tech,
Mm.
very good tech. Their app is evolving. So I don't give it a full-throated endorsement at this point, but I've been using it and I'm seeing some really interesting stuff with it as a tool. So as that company evolves, I'll tell you what I was doing, Shemaine, is that uh, so I do a lot of zone two, zone three, even zone one kind of work. And as an ex-athlete, we if your face wasn't on fire when you were training, you didn't think you were working hard enough.
Mhm.
And it's now been almost 25 years ago that I went out to a school in Colorado Springs, and there was a guy by the name of Chris Carmichael. Chris was Lance Armstrong's coach. And Chris introduced this concept of threshold training, finding out where your anaerobic threshold is, um, and training just below it, training below that threshold, because that's really where you get your development.
Mhm.
Now, so and when I'm talking about heart rate now, that's zone three of a five zone system.
Mhm.
Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
And now we know there's benefit in zone two. When you look at the research and you look at the practice, there's a lot of people training in zone two, and it's now become real popular in the biohacking space. Peter Attia talks about it. But the challenge with zone two is that physiological markers are hard to come by. Um, and again, we're conditioned that if we don't create a puddle, we're not working hard enough.
Or yeah,
Um,
we're not in pain or suffering.
yeah, yeah. So I was wearing my Now Watch, and I'm just starting to ride, and I'm in zone one, working my way into zone two, and I look down, and my HRV is sky high. It's 250, 350 milliseconds of what's called RMSSD. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? Is this thing broken?
Yeah.
Um, well, I do a couple more rides and I'm getting the same impact. Now, ironically, I think it was my third or fourth ride I was doing this and looking at this. In the middle of my ride, my brother called me. And so I take the call while I'm on my bike and I'm riding an internal ergometer. I'm riding an ergometer in my home. And all of a sudden I take that call and that 250 milliseconds of HRV drops to 50. Okay. So all of a sudden, and it was like, oh, I am my stress profile just changed. All of a sudden I'm engaged. My prefrontal cortex is engaged. Prior to that, I've got music on, I'm kind of focused, I'm in the zone. So this is something for me that has been, and literally, Chemaine, this is the first time I've discussed this on a podcast. Um, and so I get this and I send this data over to the folks at Now Watch, and I don't know if they got it. I don't know if they get it. Um, but the point I want to make is that there are huge benefits that come from all work. The question is, how do we measure it? How do we see it? And so much of exercise is based on either O2, CO2, or blood lactate measures or things like that. But HRV is going to give us a new tool here if we can measure it. So I'm waiting for Now Watch to really get their act together, and move this. And I think they're going to. I think this is going to turn into a top level device.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, so that's one of the big breakthroughs I've had in the past year. And again, it goes back and reinforces that concept. Listen, if I'm training an athlete and I'm trying to get them to the Olympics and I'm doing things like that, we're going to be doing zone 3 and zone 5 training. Okay. We're going to be in those two zones. Um, but when I'm training their parents or their grandparents,
Mhm.
which is different, but they have their, but we're all humans. We all have the same physiology. Our hormones change over time, and we have to pay attention to that. But but there's value to spending that time. And I'll tell you, when I first started, working with that Chris Carmichael concept,
Mhm.
I almost felt like I was lazy. I had to give myself grace to say no. Um, and when you do that, when you stop training in zone 4 and you go down to zone 3 and you spend that time there and you have a good indicator on this, you see your progress just go off the charts.
Mhm.
Um, so this is the reason I go back to this is one of the things I'm really excited about. Number one, we've got some cool devices, and Now Watch is one of them. So you can check that out their website. And I'll tell you, if you go to my website, what I'll do is I'll work on getting a coupon code up there for them. Um, but so that, we're still working with the cannabis extracts like we talked about a year ago, the HRV plus.
Mhm.
I've got that on my website too. So I'm not with that company anymore, but I still support that product. Um, they sent me a note the other day. They had a customer reach out and had a question about HRV, and there's no one left in that company to answer. And I said, here's my meeting link. Go ahead and send it over. So I still take those meetings and I take those calls. So that, and in the last 6 months to year, we've been digging into this concept of stem cells as a recovery tool and as a recovery. So, it's always evolving. This is what's so exciting about this field, and the reason I like waking up every day.
Yeah. I want to get, we will transition into the stem cells because you know what, like HRV and stem cells, they literally go hand in hand. If you were just
Hmm.
go through the natural daily rhythms, hopefully in a healthy way, your HRV and your stem cells should both ideally optimize when you're asleep.
Sure.
But um, here in Canada, a lot of the focus completely different than Ireland, but a lot of the focus, a lot of the parents here in Ireland is that their kids all do a million sports, but the hope
Hmm.
is that one of them will make it to the National Hockey League or someone's going to make it big. I see here a lot of parents push their kids, and probably the same in the States. It's just not
Sure.
something I'm accustomed to because we don't really do that in Ireland. So a lot of people really, really like training their kids or pushing their kids to be these athletes. So the fact that you said, well, look, if you want to be the best of the best, training in zone 3 and 5 and monitoring HRV, they are some simple things that you can do to take yourself to the next level.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm going to also refer back to my website that I just put a couple posts up there. I do a talk on at comprehensive athlete development, and when we look at comprehensive athlete development, I think of a triangle, and there's three sides to the triangle. There's physiological, there's psychological, and there's skills. And when we look at all these things, the point that I make, and if you're the parent of an athlete, or if you're an athlete that's trying to make this, when you look at that triangle, there's the three sides: psychological, physiological, and skills. And then there are subcategories that come after. There's 10 subcategories that come off of that. And then there's a multitude of categories that come out of there. But the 10, and what I like to say to people is if you're struggling to move up a level, if you're trust, the biggest challenge a young athlete has is transitioning to the next level above where they're at and staying healthy, making that move and not breaking. That injury is usually the gating factor whether someone can move up to the next level.
Yeah.
Um, so that injury, so the question is where the injury is coming, and the injury can be psychological or it could be physiological. Okay, that injury can come either way. So being able to monitor that. So if your listeners, again, this comprehensive athlete development model, I think your listeners will probably like. You can find that on my website under the podcast and posts. But this is what's so important, stepping up. And the mistake that people make, Chemaine, is that they think I'll just go harder.
Yeah.
And you know what? Everyone goes hard now. Okay. That used to work in the 80s and 90s. When I was a young athlete, working harder worked.
Mm.
Um, but now everyone goes hard.
Yeah.
And so you've really got to be more scientific. You've got to be more cognitive of the challenges, and that's the reason I like that comprehensive model. And you start to look at this, and again, listen, I love. Listen, Canada is one of my favorite. My daughter played ice hockey and she plays lacrosse. The lacrosse is the national sport of Canada. And so, yeah, we love that. But we've had to deal with the same thing. Whether it's her dad wrestling or her playing hockey or lacrosse, we have to keep looking at these models and figuring out you've got to solve for the problem. You got to solve for the weakest element. Because what I tell people is you lose on your weakness, you win with your strength, you lose on your weakness. So you're constantly looking for your weak spot and trying to improve that. And you know what? This will show up in monitoring of all kinds. HRV is just one of the really good high level KPIs that you can put into your program.
Well, for sure, because if you're not recovering properly, the progression is going to stall. But
You will break.
everyone listening, so what Don said right there, we're more kind of focused on athletes and even helping your children be the best athletes they can.
Hmm.
And you're right, everyone wants to go hard nowadays. But the difference between going hard now and going hard maybe 50 years ago is 50 years ago, life wasn't going as hard on you as it is now. So now
We
not
didn't
only
have
is
cell
going,
phones and we didn't have TikTok and we didn't have all the distractions, did we?
so
Or did
now,
I? I'm not going to
yeah.
comment on your age. Did I?
So now we're trying, and I'll add in trying to go hard, but life is also going hard on us. So then we've got this challenge because I'll have to add in because it would be negligible of me not to. A lot of my listeners are going to be older generation and they're not
Hmm.
athletes anymore. They never were, maybe, but a lot of them still have the mindset to go hard, hard, hard. And like you said, I see them break. And it might not be physical, but it's for sure mental. Their sleep goes to shit. There's no HRV at all. Like it's 20
Hmm.
because there and so many clients recently I've had to say look, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to stop the high intensity cardio. Because the inflammatory markers through the roof, they're not
Right.
sleeping. So it's important to consider not only age and conditioning, but also where you are in your life. Because there's a lot of women, especially that are 40s, 50s, still think, like you mentioned, it has to hurt. I have to be red in the face. I have to go hard to get results. But they don't get results. All they do, like you said, is they break.
They get inflamed. They first get inflamed. And once you have that set in, man, it is progress is nearly impossible. Um, and oh, the number one driver of poor HRV, inflammation. That's the number one thing that drives that HRV score down. So now, but you can supplement. There are great supplemental strategies from that start with just omega 3s. I mean, supplementing with omega 3s. There's tools that you can put in there to improve inflammation. You know, one of the products I like a lot is what's called Metagenics SPMs.
Mm,
Now, SPMs, specialized pro-resolving mediators, these are the molecules that resolve inflammation. And we actually put that in our HRV plus. So
mhm,
HRV plus is a combination of cannabis extracts to normalize the endocannabinoid system. But at the same time, there's omega-3 fish oils in there with SPMs to resolve inflammation tools. But again, if we convey a message, I think the message that we want to convey is that give yourself grace. Okay. Give yourself, you don't have to go to the bone all the time.
mhm,
Now, one of the challenges is, Chemaine, is that there's dopamine when you do go hard. There's usually a dopamine kick in there, and but there's also a dopamine kick if you're using cocaine or using any other kind of drug. You know, you don't want to use dopamine as your guiding light. um but I know why it's there. I know why you feel good. I know why you do it. You walk away thinking, God, I feel good. But the problem is that when you look at the overall process, and you said it, you've got to keep looking at those markers. And there's some times when you need, there's some people will thrive on hit. Okay. Some people absolutely thrive on. We're on a continuum. We're all on a continuum. You know, you and I share human DNA. Ours deviates a little bit from the standpoint I'm a male, you're a female, so that's a pretty big deviation. We deviate now. I did one of those. I did one of those ancestry tests, and frankly, I've got a lot of DNA from the British Isles. Mine is mainly Welsh, though. But my mom's side, we've got a lot of Native American in us. But so we have some deviations there.
mhm,
But you know, when I work with people, I tell them that you only have evolution with extinction. Okay. So you have to have an extinction event for evolution to take place because it's got to wipe out a big chunk of the DNA. And whoever's adapted to whatever the extinction event then benefits. Well, in the absence of an extinction event, all we have is diversity.
mhm.
So, you know, Shemaine, you could be a vegan and I could be a carnivore or the opposite. You could do hit and I do long, slow distance kind of stuff and benefit. You know, so this is one of the things that people have to understand is that you it's important to know that someone else's program may not fit you.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, there are concepts on training and nutrition that are universal, but you have to tweak them on your own, using your own feedback and your own data to make these decisions.
There's so much trial and error, and a lot of
Absolutely.
people don't get that. I get people will hire me and ask me, create a plan, and they just think that plan is going to work, but trying to communicate with them is the fact that no, we need to take this day by day, week by week, and we'll see what your body likes, does not like. There's so much trial and error. I'm in health 20 years and I'm still learning about myself and what my body likes. And especially as I age, some things don't work anymore, but
They
new things
change.
do. And it never ends. It's that concept of what do you do when you get to your goal? The goal is end of life. There is no goal in between. You have to keep going.
Well, and quality of end of life. You know, I think we talked about this last time. You know, what do you want your last third of your life to be like? I got a couple years on you. My wife, our daughter moved out of our home 3 years ago and went and got a coaching job. And she's not coming back. She's got, she's got her own apartment, she's got her own job, she's starting her own life. And so my wife and we're entering what we call our third, which is our third. I spent my first third learning. I spent my second third earning, raising a family. Now I'm in my third. Now I don't expect to retire. I love what I do.
Yeah.
Um, and I love waking up and digging into the literature, and I hope I do that the day before I leave this earth. But I also hope I'm constantly adventuring and doing these things. And we know things change with age. We know hormones change, and we know stem cells change, and we know energy molecules change. And that's the beauty of the time that we live in,
Mhm.
that most of these can be supplemented.
Yeah.
And done so in a manner that, boy, you return back to your previous self, your first third, second third self, pretty quickly, and you can thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. There is, well, to sound cliche, aging is just a number. If you take care of yourself, you don't have to get sick and you don't have
No,
to live those last decades of your life on medication or in pain. It is a choice. As much as people don't like to hear that, it is a choice.
absolutely. Well, and Chemaine, I want to emphasize something. So I don't know if we talked about it the last time. I'm sure we did. I'm going to reinforce it, but I talk about the four rocks in the jar. What are the four rocks of longevity? When you look at longevity, the first rock in the jar is movement. You have to move, and you hack at movement with exercise. Um, then the second rock is nutrient dense food. You've got to have the right nutrients on board so the physiology of your body can work. You have to have sleep. You have to have quality sleep. You can't hack sleep, but you can hack the sleep environment. And then finally, light. You've got to get light on your skin. We are animals that have evolved, and we're learning more about this every day. But my point is, these four rocks go into the jar of purpose, um, because we live in environments now that limit our movement. We live in homes that are temperature controlled. We don't, many of us don't have stairs in our home anymore.
Mhm.
We don't have to, and if and just the simple application, we have a muscle in that flexes our knee, our humerus, our femur above 90 degrees. That's called the iliopsoas. That iliopsoas, the psoas attaches to the bottom of your vertebrae, your four bottom vertebrae, and it crosses over the sciatic nerve and starts to work its way down. And then it combines with the iliacus, and then that combines to the femur, and it crosses the sciatic nerve again. But so if you're not lifting your knee above 90 degrees, that muscle is not being stimulated.
Mhm.
And if you don't stimulate that muscle, it's going to react. It's going to say, "Hey, I want to get worked a little bit." And it's going to get sore, and it's going to aggravate your sciatic nerve, and it's going to make your legs hurt. So I have simple little exercises that I do to stimulate the iliopsoas muscle. Um, because we have to, because we don't live in a place where we have to climb anymore.
Mhm.
Okay. And this is one of the simple things. So our environment is limiting the amount of movement we do. Our environment is limiting. It's not, well, it's limiting our access to quality nutrient dense food, but those choices are still out there. It's just flooding the zone with a lot of non-nutrient dense food that we think is okay, and we just eat it because it fills us up, but it doesn't have the nutrients on board. We have Our environment is regularly attacking our sleep cycles. Okay, that we are constantly getting challenges to our circadian rhythm and challenging our sleep cycles, and that's challenging. And then finally, we're we have we have there's nutritive light. Getting out in the morning and sunrise and sunset and getting light to your eyes is very nutritive. I have a light panel over my shoulder that I use. That's a lot of infrared, near infrared light that's very beneficial light. But we also have toxic lights that we have to deal with. The light radiating from the screen that we're talking on, or the light that we see from this thing during the day. That is non-nutritive light. And in some cases it could be considered toxic. So the environment is driving these changes. We have to recognize it. We're salient humans. We're salient beings. We can recognize what's going on and then change. But those four rocks go into the jar of purpose.
Mhm.
Okay. You have to have a reason to wake up in the morning and challenge the environment. Um, I know mine is, my favorite coaching job I ever had was coaching my daughter's eighth grade field hockey team. I loved that job. Um, I can't wait to coach my grandkids. I can't wait and I want to be that crazy, I turned 63 on my next birthday, but I want to be that crazy 80-year-old wrestler that can still go into the room and teach.
Yeah.
Um, because I believe, you know what? I've now gone through several generations of wrestling. I've learned from all of them. I see things that we did in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s that are not in the sport anymore and create an advantage for kids now. So I was over yesterday teaching at a local high school where we're at. And you know what? I'm still teaching that kind of stuff. Now, I don't teach all of it, but I teach elements of it. So my purpose is to be a vigorous human for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
And to be my kids' field hockey coach or wrestling coach or lacrosse coach, whatever, but work with, seventh and eighth graders and do things like that. And so it's that purpose that you've got to have, that you got to wake up and if you don't think about it in those terms, you're gonna come up short.
I don't think a lot of people have purpose. They haven't thought about what happens in 5 years. What do I want to be when and if I do retire? Like they have not looked that far
Right,
ahead. There is that case of a lot of people just trying to survive right now, and whether or
right,
not
right,
that's financially or mentally, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But people, I think you're right, and I have, and there's certain categories of people that they've thought about what they want to be like in the future, and they're working towards that now. So that's
right.
the outcome. Just back to the movement, as you were speaking, on average, most people, and I'm not talking about yourself or myself or athletes, but on average, most people are getting between 2,000 to 4,000 steps a day. And
Right.
they don't realize it. They think they're moving more than they actually are. And for me, like I have to go out of my way to get 10,000 steps because I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm doing emails, I'm
Hmm.
doing content. And before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I've got 6,000 steps today. I've got to go out of my way to make that up. But the majority of people are not. And this is where that last third of their life that you're referring to, they're almost playing catch up or they're just settling for the inevitable because the first two-thirds they weren't more proactive, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, they're ignoring the inevitable. I mean, again, I think you're exactly right. I think people just get caught up in life and they're not able to think about it. And then all of a sudden, I love telling a story about there's a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman. And Martin was the president of the American Psychological Association. And in his acceptance speech, he said, psychology is really good at helping people go from -10 to zero. He
Mhm.
says, why aren't we helping people go from 0 to 10?
Yeah.
And and I love that concept. We talked about Peter Attia earlier. His book Outlive, he has this concept in there that's called Medicine 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Medicine 1.0 was Hippocrates. Let's look at some of our behaviors that helps. And then Medicine 2.0 was around the discovery of the light microscope. We started to see things that we can see bacteria and virus and things. We developed germ theory. So these were all really good tools as well. Now, Dr. Attia has now introduced this concept of medicine 3.0. And this is where we're starting to take a look at our personal response because so much of medicine 2.0, whether you're in Health Canada or whether you're in the United States in our healthcare system, it's very much about moving people from -10 to zero.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, I'm not interested in zero. I'm interested in being above zero. I want to be in that thriving state.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, and it's a lot of it's mindset. And what we know, Chemaine, what we know for sure is that there are two life cycles that we deal with. We have what's called your lifespan. That's the number of days you breathe. And then you have what's called your health span. That's the number of days you breathe and you're not diseased. Okay. And hopefully we can push our health span to be equal to our lifespan so that we're spending just, I lost my brother 3 years ago. He was dealing with an autoimmune disease, and then he got COVID, and it took him out. And he spent the last 3 or 4 months of his life, in a bed on tubes and just in a bad place. And this is a guy that was a hunter and a fisherman and a wrestler and you know what? I'm not interested in that. I want to do everything I can to avoid that. Um, and so know that without the investment of movement, nutrient dense food, paying attention to sleep, and getting light on your skin at the right time, in the absence of investing in that, you're basically moving the health span away from lifespan. You're increasing. We call this I'm drawing a blank. Morbidity. You're moving that morbidity so it kicks in earlier. You want morbidity to go with mortality. I want them to line up. You know what? If I'm sick for a week, I'll be okay with that. I'm more interested in maybe being out and hiking the Grand Canyon and slipping and enjoying the ride down.
Yeah.
I want those views the whole way, from before the slip until afterwards. So
I agree, 1,000,000%. Yesterday, someone not so nicely told me that I was too hardcore when it comes to health. And I was
no,
like, you know what I am, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I am hardcore when it comes to health because that's how important I think it is. It's the
yes,
only thing, it's the only option. Yes, we've love, family, time, time is of the essence, but health is right up there. And I am very hardcore. And for a while, I was apologizing for it, saying, well, no, we can adjust things for you and we can make it easier. And now I'm not apologizing. No, you either
no.
do it or you don't.
My father grew up in the mountains of North Carolina and grew up on a tobacco farm. And for the majority of my life, my father was a 2 to 3 pack a day cigarette smoker. And 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 what was interesting, so you grow up in this household, and then my brothers and I moved and went away to college. And my brother and I were roommates my freshman year at the university. And I come back to my room one day and I open the door and I walk in the room and I go, Dad's been here. You could smell
Yeah.
the smoke. Well, my dad then, probably 6 years after that, has a massive coronary on the sideline of the Ohio State Michigan game. Um, and he got through it. He was in the right place at the right time to be able to get through this. And it was an incredible challenge for him. But it was that event. Prior to that event, he almost felt like he had a requirement, that he grew up in that tobacco culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And he almost felt like not only can you smoke tobacco, but you should.
Mhm.
Well, now I have zero tolerance for smoking. Zero.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but you know what? There's a lot, everyone's talking about reforming the healthcare system. I'm like, listen, you got so many things you got to deal with before you worry about reforming the healthcare system. Let's get people to stop smoking.
Yeah.
Um, and then we need to take a hard look at alcohol too. Um, because, and again, you want to see something that'll crush your HRV,
Oh, for
your alcohol. You
sure.
want to improve your alcohol, you want to improve your HRV, take the alcohol out of your life, and you'll see the impact that it has. That's what's so incredible about it.
Oh, for sure. As much as a nice, tasty glass of red wine is, it messes up sleep. We know it directly interferes with REM sleep. But now, I don't know if you've seen the recent research, like even one drink a week is enough to cause hormonal imbalances and potentially upswing that propensity for cancer in the future. Like, we had been going on for so long that one glass of red wine a night was good for you, and people still have that in their head. That was never shown to
No,
be true, and it's been debunked. And even one
yeah.
glass a week now, especially for women, because our liver's more sensitive, very problematic, which
Ab-
sucks. because I like a
I,
glass of wine.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I get it, but I'll tell and even though I work in cannabis and I spend a lot of time there, I do not smoke cannabis. There's other ways to consume those products and formulate those products that don't require it goes through your lungs. Because I think you're nuts for putting stuff through your lungs like that, and particularly things like vaping when
Let's
you're
not go
drawing oil.
there.
I
That
I so before we try and revitalize or reinvent the healthcare system, let's go back and look at our illness production system. Let's go back and look at smoking and alcohol and food that has no nutrient value whatsoever. Okay. Now it's something that you food, it fills your belly. And we've convinced people to stop looking at proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and they don't look at the micronutrients, the vitamins, minerals, phenols. Um, that's where the value's at. And Chemaine, there's some basic things that if you're buying a product that has a food label, you probably should put it back. Um, but if you go buy a vegetable, or if you go buy a fruit, or if you go buy a cut of meat, that doesn't have a food label on it. Okay.
and if it
Those
does, put it back.
Yeah. Now listen, I'm not that hardcore. Listen, I eat crappy food every day. Okay. I love freaking hot dogs. Okay, don't get me wrong. I freaking love hot dogs and I eat hot dogs. Um, but I'm not suggesting that we have to follow a monastic lifestyle in order to get to our objective. Just little changes deliver amazing results. Um, and we know once you stop smoking, 8 months after you stop smoking, your cancer risk has almost dropped back to someone who's never smoked. It's little things like that. And when you get alcohol out of your diet, it's amazing how good you feel. Um, I'm trying to. I had a drink of alcohol. A bunch of my university friends were back in town, and we got together a couple weeks ago, and we drank a toast to one of our Conrads that is no longer with us. Um, so I drank a drink. We had a shot there, and I think that's probably the last drink of alcohol I've had probably in 6 to 9 months. Um, and oh, by the way, I took the hit on my HRV that night too. But but you know what? I was celebrating one of my best friends.
Yeah. Well, there
And
does
so
have to be balance as well. We're not telling everyone like it's my way or the highway. There has,
right.
I mean, I'm not going to sacrifice certain holidays and vacations and stuff just to be a complete masochist.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to move on to the stem cells. But
Hmm.
before that, I have a theory. Vaping is, it's a huge pet peeve of mine. I think it's such a disservice to society and it
I
makes me
agree.
angry. Why did you bring this to the market? Like, it really makes me angry. But I have a theory. Everywhere I look, I see all age groups vaping. And I'm an Irish mom. So I've told my boys, if I catch you doing that, you need to run a mile. But I see men in cars, 50s, 60s, 70s vaping. I see women. And I have this theory that everybody who vapes, they're either struggling a lot with anxiety and they're using it as a crutch, or there's some other underlying mental health issue. I really just looking at people, and that's just my own theory, but I seem to connect the two together.
Well, and let me take a step back. Um, I am a proponent of nicotine use strategically.
Mhm.
Okay, nicotine can be a very effective molecule, um, but you can consume nicotine without smoking and vaping.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's really important. When I get ready to do a big talk, if I'm at a conference and doing a big talk, I'll usually stop at the drugstore and I'll pick up some nicotine gum.
Yeah.
Now, I don't use nicotine on a regular basis, so my receptors are wide open. I've tried those Zen packets or whatever they are, and those things crush me. Just crush me. It's way too much. But I'll use a little bit of nicotine, and it can be a very effective molecule. Dragging it through your lungs in either smoke or oil is nuts.
With
Okay.
the other chemicals that are in it,
Yes.
aldehydes and what, like, oh, it tastes like strawberry. That's not the same as eating a strawberry.
No, no. And yeah, so yeah, no, the tobacco industry, we started to regulate it. It cut down on smoking. So someone said, how can we sell products to these people and not smoke them? Well, that's when vaping came up, from the same people that brought you smoking. And I want to go back. Native American cultures use tobacco in a very spiritual manner. Okay, they will smoke and use tobacco spiritually, but they do it occasionally. Okay. It's not like my dad that was going through, 3 packs of Winston's a day, and just polluting his lungs. It, it's important to recognize the difference. I said if I were ever king of the world, if you want to smoke, I don't have a problem with it, but we won't sell cigarettes. We'll sell tobacco and rolling paper, and you've got to make your own cigarette. And I'll tell you what, that'll cut smoking down dramatically.
Yeah, because it's
Um,
gross.
well, because it's gross and it's hard to do. I mean, we've made vaping and smoking so convenient. We stop in, drop $7 to $10, get a pack, and walk out. I remember when my dad was losing his mind over buying a carton of cigarettes for $3. And now, I mean, it's almost $3 a cigarette.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's what stepped into that space. It's a company that's trying to make a profit for its shareholders that really doesn't give a darn about the health of their users. So, this is as we're looking at biohacking and this process of human optimization. Let's get okay, what are the big disease rocks? Let's get smoking out of the way. Let's get alcohol consumption out of the way. Let's start with those two. Okay. And if we start with those two, man, a lot of things move up pretty quickly.
But me and you know that's not going to happen because how much money would be lost there?
There's a lot of money lost now. And again, because money spend it. But you know what? The more we tell the story, Chemaine, the more we do this, I think back. And I don't know what the answer to this reform. We're in a middle of a huge political debate down here in the States right now with all the things that are going on, and they're talking about changing the healthcare system and doing this and doing that. And I remember when I was watched during COVID, at the beginning of COVID, I was watching the news. And there was this bus driver. This guy was in Detroit. He was a bus driver in Detroit. And the news interviewed him. And he says, yeah, people are getting on the bus. They're hacking all over the place. um, and then if I need to go back and find the story, but 3 weeks later, that bus driver was dead. He had contracted COVID and passed away from it. And this is a guy that wakes up in the morning, goes to work. He's trying to provide for his family. Probably stops at Dunkin' Donuts on the way and gets a cup of coffee and a donut. And he's obese. He's not exercising. He's not moving enough. He's not getting enough nutrient dense food. He's probably stressed pretty high, so his sleep's messed up. He doesn't have light on his skin because he's in Detroit. So he's missing all four of the big rocks.
And
Okay.
he's probably
So
miserable as well.
who knows? But all I know is that virus took him out. Just a virus, and COVID was so interesting because there's some people that were completely symptom free. That virus did not affect them at all. It killed my brother. It killed that bus driver. So there's a spectrum that comes into play, and that's why it's so important for you to own your own process, to pay attention to these things. Back when COVID hit, I was speaking at a conference in Florida, and everybody in this conference got sick. Okay, and it was like, we're all talking, a week or two afterwards. Everyone had gotten sick. Um, I did not. I did not get sick at that conference. Now, I was in the middle of a massive fast. It just hit my schedule, and I was fasting really, really hard. But when I went back and looked at my wearable data, my HRV data, I'm sure I had the COVID virus because I saw a drop in HRV. I saw an increase in respiration. I saw an increase in body temperature. I'm sure I had the virus, but I was relatively symptom free. And that's just the difference. I was exercising. I was fasting. COVID affects the autophagy process in the cells where fasting improves it. COVID was attacking it. And this was the interesting juxtaposition of that. So yeah, I don't know, Shemaine, I don't know how we're going to get there. How we're going to get to the bus driver in Detroit and help him understand that his purpose, to see his grandkids and his grandkids grow up. I remember teaching one of my classes back, and this would have been 2014, 2013. Um, and I taught at a small school that was mainly athletes. So we had a lot of African Americans, and I was teaching an introduction to health class. And I said, "So how many of you have family members that have had limbs amputated?" Nearly everybody in the room's hand went up. Well, this is one of the byproducts of diabetes and the racial impact of this. And so how do I get that message to connect? Well, that day, I got the message to connect to the role of sugar and insulin resistance because I was able, and when you saw every hand go up, the rest of the room is like, oh my God. And it wasn't just Aunt Judy, it was everybody. And so I don't know how we're going to get there, but I do believe that we can. I do believe that we should. And it's conversations like this is where it starts.
Well, yeah, if we can reach at least one or two people at a time, then we're making a difference. And there's a lot of podcasters out there now. I interview a lot of people. You're on a lot of shows. So for every one or
Mhm.
two people, maybe they tell their friends. There is hope. It's just a long road.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. So
So
yeah,
let's
it's not going to be.
transition into stem cells because it's very relevant to everything we've just said. And a lot of people they don't know what stem cells are. Put it like
Yep.
that. They don't. They think it's just science. Um,
Well, so let's talk about it a little bit. So stem cells is really interesting. It's a new science that we're working through, and a stem cell is basically your body's healing process. It's what fixes everything in your body. And as if you don't have stem cells, you die.
yeah.
Because literally your tissues are always changing over, they're always moving. So this is what a stem cell comes from. Now, from an application standpoint, when you go exercise, when you go lift a weight, and you create a micro trauma in that muscle, the body responds. So you have a specialized stem cell on board in the muscle that's called a satellite cell. So when you stimulate that myofibril, that satellite cell donates its DNA to the cell to have the cell repair. Um, and so this is just an example. So you've got to have androgens on board. You got to have some testosterone in there. You've got to have the receptor activated, but that stem cell. So, and now there are supplements that stimulate stem cell circulation. This is where a product called Stem Regen comes from. You'll see it on my website if you go look at it. But this is a group of plant botanicals that have been clinically demonstrated to improve stem cell release and circulation. Because what happens, Chemaine, is that as you age, when you're young, your bone marrow, where stem cells come from, all your bone marrow is very red when you're very young. And you have lots of stems. That's why, because you're growing so much. But as we begin to age, a lot of that red marrow turns yellow and it stops producing stem cells. Now, you always have a reserve of it, though. There's always some there. And and stem cells work kind of like a water well. If you take a bucket of water out of the well, it backfills and fills back up. And stem cells do the same thing. Now, what a product like Stem Regen does is that it causes the increased release and circulation of stem cells. But we can do other things to boost stem cells. There's a hack that's called blood flow restriction training. So we can put, and I have this on my website too, if you want to look at it. You put bands on your limbs and you restrict the blood flow back to the body. Well, this has been clinically demonstrated to increase stem cell circulation, which is which is really what we're going for. So there's mechanical processes and there are chemical processes. And again, as stem cells improve, HRV will improve, our readiness, our recovery, our resilience, which is all indicated through HRV. These all add in. So, and I think what we're going to find, Chemaine, as I've been looking at this, you can take a team of individuals and I can expose that whole team to a training session or a series of training sessions. Some people will thrive. Some people will be okay, and some people can't get out of the training room. What's the difference in those three groups? Well, I contend that it's stem cells. I contend that, and again, everyone's different. It could be hormones, It could be stem cells. It could be some of those micronutrients. It's like, the role of NAD and cellular energy and the ability for genes to actually activate. But but again, going back to, if you're struggling with some of these things, you can facilitate the return to normal through supplementation and behavioral practices.
Hmm. And fasting, you mentioned just before we finish now,
Yes.
fasting is a way that you can influence stem cells. If you don't want to fast, at the very least, go to bed on an empty stomach and you can influence your stem cells there. And another one of my favorite tools for stem cells that I use is chlorophyll, which I believe
Mm.
might be in stem regen. But another fantastic, insightful conversation, Don. This has been great. I love the way our conversations flow so easy.
I do too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, this was great. I'll put everything in the show notes, your website, the link to that article, everything. But before we go, quick, is there anything you want to leave people with? A little bit of motivation or inspiration?
Listen, the inspiration there is the possibility to change your future. Years ago, I came up with a personal mission statement. My personal mission statement is helping individuals understand the changes necessary to alleviate suffering and contribute to the betterment of well people. There are things that you can do on a daily basis to alleviate suffering. I talked earlier about, I got together with dinner with a bunch of my mates from college, and one of my friends, he's waiting for a kidney transplant. He's already had a limb amputated, and I was talking to him 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm like, Johnny, get your ass in the weight room. Okay, there's no better way to monitor to manage blood sugar than lifting weights. The single best way you can. And when you depend on insulin, you're basically signing your death. If you're type 1 diabetic, absolutely you have to have insulin on board. But if you're type 2, if you're insulin resistance, get your ass in the weight room. Your future is in your control. Okay? If you don't know how to do it, there's people out there. Chemaine is one of these people that is there to help you figure this out. That's what I do. If you can find us both, you've already found her. If you're looking for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Put me in, put a note, or go to my website, trainrecoverwin.com. There's people out there that do this, and take advantage of them. Take advantage of a good coach.
And that's a wrap, friends. Excellent. Thanks for your time again, Don Moxley, and we might see you again in the future.
I can't wait.